We will take 1 more minute. Yeah, we are live.
Okay.
Go ahead, Komal.
Okay. Good evening. A very warm welcome to all of you today. I am Komal Gupta, Bureau Chief, Services Reporter Magazine. Services Reporter is glad to
Muted. Komal, you muted.
Madhu, Komal is muted.
oh,
Restart, Komal.
yes. Hello everyone. Good evening. A very warm welcome to all of you today. I am Komal Gupta, Bureau Chief, Services Reporter Magazine. Services Reporter is glad to present and host this fantastic talk in association with and guests today. Through these knowledge sharing sessions, we aim to connect you to some of the most wonderful people, fantastic designers, academicians, and thought leaders across the world. Without taking any more time, let me introduce you to our esteemed guest today. Architect Antoine Picon needs no introduction. Trained as an engineer, architect, and historian, Antoine Picon is a professor of the history of architecture and technology at Howard University's Graduate School of Design. He is also the president of Le Corbusier Foundation. In 2010, he was elected as a member of the French Academy des Technologies. Professor Picon has authored several books and articles on the relationship between architecture and technology, on the other hand, and science and technology. Picon has been honored with numerous awards for his writing, including the Médaille de la Ville de Paris and uh, twice the Prix du Livre d'Architecture de la Ville de Paris, as well as the George Sarton Medal of the University of Caen. Welcoming you, Architect Picon. Along with him, another notable panelist who has joined us is Architect Sangeet Sharma, partner, S.T. Sharma Architects, Chandigarh. He has been conferred honorary doctorate at Berkeley University. His architecture is termed as Cubist modernism and is highly influenced by Chandigarh's modern and sustainable architecture. He is widely published and featured in prestigious journals in India and abroad. He is a winner of 10 awards in architecture. He has authored 5 cult books on architecture. His latest, Castles in the Air, took the profession by storm. He has been awarded 2 literary awards in authorship, including National Book Honor Award 2017. He is also a poet and has penned his poem in English under the title The Touch of the Moon. He was awarded the Poet of the Year by Poetry Society. Welcoming Architect Sangeet Sharma. Also, we have architect Kapil Setia with us. He is the chief architect of Chandigarh Administration, Department of Urban Planning, graduate from Chandigarh College of Architecture in 1987. And now, I am handing over to architect Rajendra Kumar who to start the session. Before that, let me say a few words about him. Architect Rajendra Kumar is currently serving as the director, School of Architecture, Noida International University. He has over 15 years of experience designing projects ranging from urban scale to building and interiors and is currently involved in academia and research. He is also an active member of various think tanks. Over to you, Rajendra.
Thank you so much, Komal. Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction of our keynote speakers. And uh, thank you so much, Professor Picon and Architect Kapil Setia and Sangeet sir. I mean, it has been always great to connect with the Chandigarh and the architect Chandi. I am alma mater from Chandigarh College of Architecture, though I am living in Delhi, but still Chandigarh will be always close to my heart. we have another wonderful speaker, Antonine Picon, such a great architect and theoretician. We have had a meeting almost like a 5-6 year back. Today, our session is going to be in two parts, mainly in two parts. First, for 20-25 minutes, we will have a certain one-to-one dialogue and discussion with Professor Picon. And after that, we will also request our other panelists, architect Kapil Setia and architect Sangeet Sharma, to come and to share your experiences about working in Chandigarh. And I believe Professor Picon can remember that he and architect Kapil Setia has worked on some project. So Kapil sir, can you just a brief, can you give just a small brief about your earlier association before we go for dialogue, so that at least Picon knows that he has, other than me also, he has also worked with you also. Kapil sir, just a brief introduction, then we'll go for formal dialogue session.
Good evening, everyone. I think I welcome Professor Picon here. We had been interacting with him for the inscription of the Capitol complex as part of the transnational serial nomination, which was titled as Works of Le Corbusier. I think it was behest of Foundation Le Corbusier, the French government, that we all started working together, 7 countries, 17 sites, and kind of mapped out our outstanding universal values to let this be a very important serial nomination, first of its kind for India. And it gave us a new experience in terms of getting international cooperation, not only in terms of getting the inscription, but working together to conserve these important sites. It is a very important work of Corbusier, which has really given a good impression of the modern movement all over the world. And his imprint as a global architect is well recognized by this inscription. I think the thought of this idea of what we now call globalization has a different context to what Corbusier gave. He was very, very contextual. He was very, very far-sighted, and that's what I think got us this title. Working with Professor Picon, of course, was very important, and very good interactions with him before the inscription or after the inscription for the entire series. I think we can build on this by his words, by wisdom, whenever we kind of meet and understand what needs to be done and how we need to take this relationship further down.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kapil sir. Today we have almost the audience from how many lives are there? Almost we have more than 100 live audience right now. We are adding in our experiences. We have seen more than 500 or 2,000 audiences across India and across the world. And we have among the audience, we have architects, we have a student of architecture, and some of designer also. So Professor Picon, good afternoon. Picon, Professor Picon, I hope you don't mind if I call you Picon. Is that okay? Picon, you need to unmute your mic.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Picon, very good afternoon. Welcome. You are again welcome in India, not with physically. We met first time in Chandigarh in Hotel Taj, and so we are meeting again. So as I said, that we will have some dialogue. It's like an informal interaction about your experiences for a student of architecture or for architects in India or in general global architects. I have framed certain questions, so I would request if you can give your reflection on those questions. So I start my question that you have worked in a government administration, as architect Kapil Setia was mentioning, that you have also worked for on the patronage of Ministry of Culture. You have also had India also for documenting of Chandigarh for World Heritage City. You have worked on a government position on a leadership level, modern infrastructure, and you are also architect and engineer, both combined together. You worked on many landmark projects on bridge and road network in France, the country which has a great sensitivity toward history and modernity. And at the same time, you know that Paris is a very historical, but Paris is also undergoing a lot of paradigm shift of architects and in architecture and infrastructure on a historical and modernity both. We know the La Defense project also. So can you just share some of your experiences of challenge of traditional and contemporary architecture marriage?
Well, perhaps I'll begin by saying that, architecture and engineering, it's not only producing objects, it's also having a conversation. And, to mention Chandigarh, I think what has been important in Chandigarh is that, Chandigarh is something that is alive and is something, I'm delighted to have Kapil Setia here because, this is an ongoing conversation. And I think it's only dialogue that can enable to manage, how to reconcile heritage and the possibility of a different future. I think in some ways, Paris is, quite an old city, not as old as Indian cities, but it's still relatively old. I think it's always a question of dialogue to know how to reconcile history and the possibility of a different future. I think in the case of Paris, it's very clear that it has a very strong image, and this image is a challenge to modernize the city, to change it. I think in some ways, Chandigarh has also the same problem. It is one of the most famous historic modern cities in the world. And so how to prepare for the 21st century. So I believe first and foremost in dialogue, and in dialogue that includes architects, engineers, people from politics, but also, the inhabitants of the city, etc. In the case of Paris, I think the biggest transition will be climate change. We used to live in a very northern latitude, but the climate is going to change extremely quickly, and many of our monuments and housing are not adapted to that.
Okay, so we can maybe we can go for second question also. Paris is also, witnessing a lot of star architects. I know some of the architects who are working all over world, and they are also working in Paris. There are a lot of good addition of contemporary architecture. What is your comment about global scenario of star architects? Comment. This question might be very interesting for a student of architecture who are listening. Star architecture.
Okay, I think architecture needs star. Le Corbusier was a star at his time, in his time, etc. But I think architecture is not reducible to star architects. I think actually, and I think perhaps the time of, star architects cult is a bit over. Of course, young students may dream to become Bjarke-Ingel-like, or may dream to become, people of great fame, etc. But I think times are changing, and we need also architects to be engaged, given the new social, political, and environmental challenges. So I think in a way we will always need star architect because we need, people to build prestigious signature building, but architecture, fortunately, not reducible to that. We need architect to construct, and to go back to Chandigarh, don't forget that Le Corbusier was not the only architect in Chandigarh, and that actually Chandigarh is made also of a lot of contribution of other architects, and otherwise there would be no Chandigarh. So I think there again, architecture is a collective enterprise. So I think perhaps it might be the end of a star architect only period and entering into a different world.
Yeah, that's thank you so much for your question. Though I did not wanted to mention any architect's name per se, since you mentioned about Bjarke-Ingel and of course the Corbusier. Yes, Paris is seeing Paris. I mean, for whole Europe. I mean, whole Europe is seeing a lot of architects, big architects. We call it Renzo Piano, Foster. They are not working only in Europe. They are working all over the world. And you also mentioned about Chandigarh and also the contribution of other architects working in Chandigarh project. Maybe not only architect like Maxwell Fry, Pierre Gendre. We also have one architect with us, Sangeet Sharma. his father has worked closely with Corbusier. I mean, so he's, our mentor. We had learned a lot. His father learned a lot by Corbusier, and we, Indian architect, we learned a lot by his father. So, uh, architect Sangeet Sharma, we would just like to have one small comment of yours. I'll request you not to be a longer in the discussion. Any comment would you like to reflect on Picon's point about Corbusier was not alone in making of Chandigarh. There was a lot of extension of Corbusier was also there. Sangeet, sir, yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, Rajendra. Hi, Rajendra. Thank you very much for inviting me. Hi, Picon. Thank you very much. Taking a clue from what you said that star architects may not be required anymore, but I must tell you, and I heard it from my father, he's at the age of 89 still working. Corbusier was always a star, and we may say that Chandigarh was made by many architects, but he led the show. And as I hear from the people, he always liked to lead the show, and the master concept was his. The basis of the design was his. And so he laid the scenario of what had to be. I think he was fortunate to have his associates loyal to him. And as far as I have heard from our father, there was no ambiguity, no fight, no animosity. So I think it was pure luck that he had good people to work with him. So Chandigarh is like that, and we Corbusier.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Architect Sangeet, and we will have a longer discussion with all the four panelists, and maybe in the second part of the session. So my next question goes to Picon is, I mean, India and France both are a great nation. We have a lot of historical ties before, not only, I mean, before Chandigarh also, there was a lot of historical and political ties. Chandigarh city, I mean, of course, after the Chandigarh, the ties were a little bit more prominent. Even non-political connections were also there in case of in case of India and France. Just for your information to Picon, I would like to say the President Hollande, when he came to India, his first meeting with the Prime Minister happened at Rock Garden, Chandigarh. It was not an official meeting, not only in the capital city of India. President Hollande met first time to Prime Minister of India in Chandigarh, just a rock garden which is very close to the Secretariat. So India and France, good connection. Chandigarh became a catalyst for movement of architecture development in India, which architect Sangeet can also confirm also. So what is your take about the future of India and France ties? We are architects, so we will restrict our comment on architectural ties. We will not go political. So comment of Picon about India and France architectural ties, knowing that Chandigarh plays in a backdrop.
How about, okay, I'll be honest with you. I do think, you know, what has made the relation, I would say perhaps it's time for India to export architects to France. That could be an idea. You know, in the 1950s, 1960s, you know, it went rather, you know, Le Corbusier went to India. You know, in an age of globalization, things should actually go in both directions. So I think the question for me, what could Indian architect bring to France, would be an interesting question for me. You know, you're a very, very large nation with a lot of ideas, a lot of young people, you know, brimming with creative intuition, etc. So perhaps I would rather say, you know, rather than France going to India, now the question may be how to do the reverse. I would say, in addition, you know, the world, the relation to Asia have been so much about China versus the West, etc. How about, you know, India as a different player, bringing a different set of ideas, being both in some ways more Western than China because of the British education heritage, and at the same time more different. And so bringing something, I think we should use globalization now to really have these, you know, two-directional dialogues. So
Yeah,
I would encourage young Indian architect to, visit France and see, how can they contribute, with ideas, etc.
that's very good suggestion. I mean, just for your information, I would also like to tell you that there is a lot of students from Chandigarh College of Architecture, our alma mater, where you also been a chief guest during the vocation. A lot of students, they work with the French architect, Dominique Perrault, Massimiliano Fuxas. So a lot of young architects are going, but it's very limited. I believe that Kapil Setia he's on a leadership position where he can also influence about uh, you know more more exposure of French architects by India or vice versa. So we'll take Kapil sir your comment in a while. Before I go for uh, next session, I would like to have one question by Picon. You have worked a lot on research and as a scholar. You have a great contribution in reform of global cities with your writing, number of books, which few of the books are also in our library also. And you have also you have done advocacy of technology as a very important element of cities, because we are talking of a smart cities in today's time. What do you think about the challenge of a possibility for the future city? Do you think that the technology is going to take over everything? Because whenever we talk about a smart city, at least in India, I'm telling you, uh, a smart city is looking like it's only technology, but it's beyond technology also. So what do you think about the emergence of technology for improvement of city? Where do you see a challenge, and how do you think that we can overcome with those challenges, at least psychologically?
Okay, a couple of things. The first is technology is nothing without society. So I don't believe in pure technological solution. Pure technological solution is a nonsense. You have to find a solution which are always at the articulation, at the interface of technology and society. Second, I do think there are two major directions of development these days. One is using digital technology to improve city effectiveness, efficiency, etc. That's what we very often call the smart city. But another equally important is, the place of nature in city, climate remediation, etc. So we have actually to think of technology also as a way to manage the place of nature in the city. So it's not only about the digital, it's the digital, the natural resources, and ultimately the people. So the challenges, I think, will be actually to make more efficient cities. But to give an example, for example, slum. How to improve slum? There are still something like 1 billion people living in slum, which is quite important. With classic technology, the only way to improve slum is very often just to demolish them and to move the people very far, which is evidently not a good solution in social terms. So how to find more agile technologies that may be able to improve the city as it is instead of demolishing it, etc. This is, for example, a challenge. How to, take Mumbai, for example. Mumbai is going to have problems with water, with a lot of other things, etc. So how to manage that is going to be an issue. So I think, but again, technology without understanding that technology is social and political. So you cannot have smart independently from who is smart. What do you want to do with digital technologies, etc. So to be clear, I'm an advocate of technology, but technology always related to social questions.
Okay, so my second question is an extension of this question. The same point about technology. And you are teaching in many part of the world. You are also teaching in one of the best university in Harvard, and you have been also in academia for quite long. You might have also seen there's a major reform in education because of social media, because of information technology, because of sophisticated software. So where do you see that architecture education is going to go with this marriage of technology? We agree, all the academicians, we agree that too much of dependency on technology by young student who is not well educated. I mean, at least the mind creativity is not well developed. The dependency on technology is really restricting for creativity development in architecture education of not only India or America it's everywhere, and it is not only limited to architecture education. It is for everything. But I will request for your comment about architects' future. I mean, young architect future. Lot of dependency on technology. Is it the future is bright, or still we need to have a wake up call?
I always believe that the future is bright, or at least you have to pretend you believe that. I would say there is no way to do without technology, but technology is like the page on which you're going to write. It's not what you're going to write. So I think technology is a prerequisite. It's not an end in itself. And I think that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is that architecture is still at its core a discipline that deals with question what it means to inhabit, what it means to live somewhere, what it means to have the physical experience of matter, of light, of those things. So I think architect should use technology. As I say, technology is like the page on which you're going to write. What you're going to write, it's still about what it means to inhabit a place, what it means to be in contact with light and shadow, with materiality, etc. So my own take is that we should, you spoke at the beginning of the relation between tradition and modernity, we should be able to reconcile the fundamentals, the core of the discipline, which is more profound than, digital technology or whatever, with the latest technological development. But of course, architectural education should, by the end, give the students a deeper understanding of what it means to live in space, what it means to have a body in relation to buildings, etc. If you take Le Corbusier was a master in those questions. So I think we have, in some ways, to use the country tools and be aware that this is not the ultimate end. The ultimate end is to make a better living, to contribute to a better quality of life for the people. So this is not technology. Technology is a tool, again.
I do agree with you. I mean, technology is a good servant and very bad master also. So yeah, I agree with you. And there are a few questions which I am thinking that when we have all the panelists, I will raise those questions. The last question which I would like to request you to give a comment to young students who are graduating, or young architect who have just recently graduated. Any message for them before we go for panel discussion?
For the youngly,
what is your message for, though this is live mainly in India, but this is all over world. So your message.
Well, a couple of things. First, it's a difficult period. The world is not in great shape. But, talking about, don't forget that modernism was born at a period in which the world was not in great shape. So a world not in great shape should be an incentive to invent a new world. That would be my first thing. Second, more than your parents, you're going to have to change a lot, change jobs, change sometime orientation, etc. So be prepared for change. And the best preparation for change is culture. Because actually culture is not about knowing a lot of things. Culture is about knowing that things can change and being prepared for change. I very often say the interest of the history of architecture is not only to show you great precedents, it's to show you how things change and to be ready yourself to contribute to the new changes that are necessary. So that would be my two message. You know, the first, it's not because it's pretty bad out there that there is no hope. There should be a lot of hope. And the second is be prepared for change and know that culture is what will enable you to change more easily.
Thank you so much, Picon. Hope and change. Yes, I mean that's a key word for young architects and a student they should at least look for. Before I go for panel session, I would request if architect Kapil Setia and Sangeet Sharma, they both are here. I have one question which is combining to architect Kapil Setia and Picon both, and then I will request architect Sangeet can also come. Both of you have worked on a project of Chandigarh. I mean, we got World Heritage City uh, tag because of the hard work of architect Kapil Setia and with the help of Le Corbusier Foundation. So architect Kapil Setia, if you can share some of your experiences of working on that prestigious project before we go to Sangeet. Architect Kapil Setia.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I just say that it was absolutely a wonderful experience to see how we could work together in different regions, different languages, different ways of working, and still come together on common platforms. I think it was all because of the motivation of Foundation Le Corbusier, which really helped us understand the nuances of the process and then deal with it in a way. There's a very interesting thing that we only went with the proposal on the file with two criteria for the nomination. But it was during the process of the final meeting that the third criteria was added at the behest of many other countries. That was a very interesting change which we observed when we attended that UNESCO meeting where the inscription was awarded to us. And that really helped us understand that the way world looks at the works of Corbusier. It is not. It was his genius which was at that moment understood and co-collaborated with everyone. The whole experience, of course, helps us understand how the other sites are handling similar challenges. There are many similar challenges, and the European cities or the cities across the globe have been before us in many of the projects. So their projects are older, their challenges have also gone through the same processes, and we could learn many things out of them. And we are building onto that, and I think our annual or biannual meetings are really helping us work together to maintain our character. And the systems have been in play, the SOPs they have gone through, helped us also build the SOPs which will make these important monuments and edifices to be long lasting. They'll really have a very good impression on the human endeavor of built environment in future as well.
Thank you, Kapil sir. I mean, architect Sangeet, if you can just comment anything about your experiences on working. I believe that you were born in Chandigarh, if I'm not wrong, architect Sangeet Sharma.
Almost. I'm close by. Yeah,
Okay.
I was born in Karnal, but I lived all my life and seen Chandigarh grow from the day one. Uh, uh, Mr. Setia and Picon, I wanted to tell you, I visited the foundation about 10 years ago. And it's a great experience. I think any architect, why only person in Chandigarh, anybody in the world, it's like a mecca of something which is so beautiful and so encouraging. Uh, but two things which I really want to ask Picon is there is less of literature being circulated by the foundation, and I think people are not aware of its contribution, of its working. So, is there, can we devise a system by which we can throw to the young architects, as Professor Rajendra was saying, for some to gain more inspiration, to gain more insight into what the foundation is doing? I may be wrong, but I myself do not get many information mails or pamphlets of this kind. So, are you going to do something about it, sir?
Two things. The first is that the foundation sees itself more as, somebody who circulate the information, etc. Or, the foundation is a place to share information. So I would say we have a website, we have a number of publications, but there are so many books on Le Corbusier that we rather try to publicize what he's done, etc. And we add our own book now and then. Also, I'd like to add that on the UNESCO list, there is a new website in which, which is a platform of information and exchange. So I think the future will be very much into, digital tools, digital platforms. That's where we're right now, we're trying to create a museum around Le Corbusier. So we have begun to really digitalize or part of our archive resources, etc. So this is what we're going to do. So yes, we're going to make progress. I agree we can do better, but
I'm sure, sir. I'm sure, sir.
we are aware that we need to do more.
Okay,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
If I mean, before I go next, I just received one message of your common friend. He said that you know him very well, Dr. Rupinder Singh.
Oh.
He just sent me a message saying hello to you. So he's live, and so hello on behalf of Dr. Rupinder Singh. One question which I intentionally I left it, I mean, in our discussion, because that question was actually is meant for all. So I would request all the speakers to give a comment about urbanism post-COVID. What do you see about this so-called, if I may say, the word monster of COVID is going to teach us means architect and urban designer. So request everyone to have your comment about urbanism post-COVID. So I request to start with Picon, please.
Okay, difficult question because it's still very early. I think it's very clear that housing will have to evolve. To give a very concrete example, we used to think in terms of number of bedrooms, and now we have to think as much in number of workplace, working place, etc., which is not the same as the traditional division of the housing into rooms. We use, space is definitely taking another meaning, etc. In urban terms, still too complicated. You've had people saying, density is over, people saying the contrary. I think density is probably not over, but density, how does it intersect with health is a fundamental question. And so, but it's still very early, but it's clear that it will have consequences. I think it will start probably with lifestyle. As I say, we are going to live differently, being more aware, etc. So I think this is the direction. So we should start from the way people live and then but for housing, I think the consequences will be very quick.
Very well taken, sir. Housing has to relook. Definitely, I agree. Architect Kapil Setia, what do you think?
Yeah. I think I hope it is a temporary phase and we kind of live over it. So I don't know whether it will really impact urbanism in that way in the long run. And since the last pandemic was a century back, I wish and hope we don't have anything at a shorter span as is being anticipated because of the climate change and the conflict between nature and the development. So I think the aspects of integration of nature into the development is what going to be emphasized. And this can be in all aspects of human endeavors. The way we kind of grow, we work, we build ourselves. All this has to be integrated very well in the environmental considerations. And that's also was being thought in terms of climate change. That was what was envisaged. So all those issues were thought, but not well implemented in terms of the impact it leaves on human health. The long-term and the short-term aspects of it on urbanism will, of course, be judged when we are over this problem and whether those issues really help us control the COVID environments and any such similar disasters which we anticipate. but we need to be a little more flexible. That's the other aspect which we need to understand, that we have to be a little more open and we need to be a little flexible. So all our typologies, all our kind of idioms, we're going to meld down in a way, and we'll have to have a little more a transitory phase where we switch from one aspect of like our hospitality has to switch to the COVID centers, and our workplaces has to switch to little more openness and more distanced spaces rather than the way we used to put people around and make them work together. Technology, of course, will help us do that. Technology will be a great game changer and will help us understand many different paradigms.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, as Picon has mentioned about that, it's too early, and you also mentioned that last pandemic in 1920. But there is a chronological change. I mean, is happening. Last was 1920, then before that it was 1820, and then before that it was 1720. So it's seeing that for every 100 years there is something is happening. And last was 1920 was lasted for 3 years. So it started in 1917 and then it ended till 1920. So if we believe that it's too early, so I believe it's still 1 or 2 more years to have our life something like always with the mask and with sanitizer as your second mobile, always that. I would like to ask the same question to architect Sangeet, but in a little bit different manner. You are a practicing architect, you have worked on project, and I'm very sure that any project which was undergoing in like 2 years back, and then there was a lockdown, and then again the redesigning process again happened. So did you ever thought about your design process of the same project which started pre-COVID, but and it was a lockdown for four months, and then again you started redesigning the same project. Did you had any consideration that, okay, this building which I need to design, it has to last, I mean, another design brief, which is like creativity after post-COVID. So your question, your comment about that particular, your design practice about integrating post-COVID, and your in general question, what do you think that it's going to be a new change in post-COVID urbanism?
Thank you, Rajendra. Thanks to COVID, half of our projects were shelved. So practicing architects had to suffer, and whatever was left, little bit was left for us. Yeah, I think the biggest problem came that the client was, he was very apprehensive about spending so much money now. So I think the first casualty was the building industry, and we all suffered. Everybody suffered, but practicing architects primarily suffered. And the first phone call which came from a client to us is, please reconsider, and can you minimize expenses? See, I'm pointing out a very beautiful thing. He's not concerned about COVID problems. He said that he will take care of. But suddenly the economy became prime to him. The expenses became prime to him. He says, please make it half. That's the first condition. And I said, how about the COVID conditions and precautions? Also, I said that you can manage, but please cut it into half. So that means economy suffered. That means the biggest challenge with which the client was that he needed to save money for the future, and that's first time. I mean, we could see that a person 6 months ago was so exorbitant and wanted to spend a lot of money. Suddenly says, please cut it into half. So there's an element of insecurity brewing in. So that I had to be as a consultant, so tell him that yes, things are bad, but we don't need to go so into cutting into half. So I think economy took a backseat and technology had to be inculcated. So all my projects, to whatever is left, other than shelved, were redesigned to basic minimum standards, basic minimum. So that's what has really impacted my practice and many others in the market.
I got it. Of course, the economy is the main concern, but
Yes.
I could have, I mean, there could have been, you will get some client who really, who want to have a better design. Of course, economy was the constraint pre-COVID also, and it will be post-COVID. Yes, in post-COVID, it got a little bit another reason, another
Yes.
excuse, if
Yes.
I may say. So how is the practice I mean, let's say practice experiences or the experiences in Paris going on? Picon, if you can give some mm, light on it. How is
I
the,
think it's pretty much the same. I think a lot of projects are either shelved or slowed down. You know, guess what? There is less money. You know, there is less money. There is an ever increasing public debt, etc. And a lot of companies and private actors are waiting to see how things are going to turn. So they're waiting before investing. So that's pretty much the same. To give you an example, you know, we were in negotiation to really launch or museum, Le Corbusier museum project, and now it's stalled until better days. And so I think let's hope it doesn't last for 3 years. That's all I would say. Because in the 1920s, the world could probably do with 3 years of infection. I think today I'm hoping really that this will be getting to improve by fall 2021. That would be really a good thing.
okay, so yeah, the projects are stopped all over, not only in India, all over world. And I believe that Europe is also going into the second phase of lockdown also, because I believe
Yeah, we are locked down in France, and in the UK it's the same, etc. Yes, we are in the second wave, which may be worse than the first, which is not very reassuring.
Rajendra,
yes.
I'm curious to know about the museum, Picon. What's that museum which you are planning to make of Corbusier?
We are thinking of doing, well, the project, but right now the project has stopped until better days, as I said, but the project was in front of next to the Villa Savoie to have the possibility to display part. You said that we were not visible enough. So one of our big projects is actually to create a museum, which would be also a study center on Le Corbusier's work. And the idea was to put it right in front of the Villa Savoie on the other side of the street in Poissy, which is well connected to the very center of Paris. So that's the big project. But right now, you know, every mayor on earth, so a project like that, you need political support. But right now, political people are so busy trying to survive the crisis. So that's why also I'm hoping for better days sooner rather than later to restart the discussions.
We really hope it comes up. Thank you very much.
Going with the extension of the same question, what architect Sangeet has mentioned, and the project, I mean, we have seen very big major tragedy a few years back about the fire in Notre Dame monument.
Yes.
So do you think that with Notre Dame, with the reconstruction of Notre Dame, is going to see some global architects working in Paris? So I mean, of course, this tragedy was very hard. I mean, it took everybody on shock. But do you think that it also gives an opportunity for more global architects to integrate and to think about a new definition of Notre Dame, not the same?
Okay, I'll be frank with you.
Yeah,
I see your point. I'm actually, you know, this is a debated issue. I'm against new intervention. Just imagine the Taj Mahal lost, you know, a fourth or a fifth of its construction. Would you, you know, if 2/3 of the Taj Mahal had disappeared, then the question could be to have, you know, new intervention, etc., because it's a ruin. But if it's only a fifth or a sixth or not even, You know, would you really have, I don't know, Herzog and de Meuron come and do a new version or just rebuild the Taj Mahal? So I think it makes no sense in the case of Notre Dame, because by the end, you know, of course, there's serious problem with the stone, etc. But the monument is it's still very much what it is. So, you know, what would be the sense not to put it back in the state it was, knowing that it's not only a Gothic cathedral, it's a Gothic cathedral reinterpreted by the 19th century, but that's what it is. And so I think, you know, I know that a number of star architects wanted to build their own spire on top of Notre Dame, etc., in fiber carbon or whatever. But I think actually Viollet-le-Duc design was not a bad design. And you know, in that, as I said, you know, if we had only a third of Notre Dame remaining, then the question would be more valid. But, you know, most of the monument is intact, despite the shock, and most of the vaults. Well, it may change because the pool building is not yet fully consolidated, but so it doesn't make sense at this stage.
I'll take the point of architect Kapil Setia also on this, but yes, I'm glad that you mentioned it. You don't do the same mistake like a Denver museum by Del Lebenskind or René Sofia in Madrid by Jan Nouvel. You know, yes, it is something which is the
yeah. Well, you know, it's not Reina Sofia is a different story for me, because, you know, it's not that I'm against a modern, you know, if a modern architect was to build on the island of La Cité, why not? But Notre Dame itself as a monument is a different story. As I say, it's like the Taj Mahal for you. It's, you know, one of these symbols, both of a nation and you know, it belongs to the world at the same time.
Yeah, the same. I mean, I would also like to have a comment of architect Kapil Setia about this very similar kind of a story. Not similar, let's say, the Museum of Knowledge by the unbuilt dream of Corbusier. So, architect Kapil, would you really like to have the same kind of the dream of Corbusier in Chandigarh, or do you think that the Museum of Knowledge should be the new vocabulary,
I think
respecting the, let's say, Corbusier?
it was a very relevant kind of a project when he conceived it, and it was very futuristic. What we talk of information technology or the basic source of information to take decisions was there in 1950s. And we saw that change happening through technology, and the evolution of IT and all that decision making has almost become at the palm of our hand. So I don't know whether it is still relevant to go in for a similar kind of a program. And that's what our challenge with the project is. The other challenge is that now it is part of the inscribed property. So we'll have to go through a much more rigorous process, taking everybody, all the other stakeholders on board, and then do a heritage impact assessment, whether we really can build on to the similar program. Or I don't think so anything drastically different will be allowed in that sense. Will be logical as well, because that was actually the crown in that composition. So that crown in composition can't be really altered in a way that we can look at a different context now. We are through that process. The College of Architecture has been tasked to research on it, come out with a very senior professionals have been involved. The heritage committee is working towards it, and see whether we still need to work on the thing. But what we still at loss is the program. What will the building finally used for? And that's what loses our focus. With the kind of money now the government is getting from as taxes from the lower economy, I don't see it coming, at least in the near future, because the large projects, the infrastructure projects which the government is envisaging for the city, are also suffering because of loss of taxes. And we are actually, as government organization, also losing about 60-70% of our projects in the department, because we no money to build on them. So the projects are already conceived, but they're not building because of till we improve our financial situation of the country.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll take one question which is for Picon. I mean, some student on Facebook Live is saying that, sir, you mentioned about India and France architecturally exposure of each other, not only Indian to France and France to India. So some students have asked the question about it. How do you think, and what is your recommendation that how the student can get exposure of French architects? Yes, uh, we had been discussing with the student about it, but hearing from your mouth will really give the motivation to students. How do you think that Indian student can get into French?
Well, I think I think it must be an effort on the long run. That's not going to take a week or a month. I think relations should be established more systematically to begin with between School of Architecture. I'm sure, I don't know how many School of Architecture have agreement with, a French school, etc. But I think it could be a start, and to see how to exchange students. They have students, for example, they have students traveling to Ahmedabad, for example, who've had a wonderful time there. I think it begins with students exchange. And then probably, yes, practices once, a number, because, you've got to know a little bit the country and then, find jobs. But I think it starts already with, you mentioned education. I think this is one of the key role of education, which is to enable international circulation. So I do think that's the starting point. India has a number of distinguished School of Architecture, so they should definitely, try also not only look at towards London or New York, but also look towards Paris.
I would like to update you, Picon. At our school, we are having an agreement with the European Union for signing an agreement of Erasmus Plus. Yes, we know.
This is great. This is great.
And when I was studying in Italy, the Erasmus was one of the very great experience for mainly European students. So that time the Erasmus Plus was not existing, but now this with the Erasmus Plus, I believe that there is a lot of opportunity between non-European and Asian countries also. So that's what we are doing now. We have already crossed 3 minutes more. I remember Professor Picon has a very busy schedule, and he said that he would like to give one more, not more than 1 hour, because I know he has very, very busy commitment. And it's saying that, we now the professor are teaching from their comfort of their house, online and all. But believe me, as academician, I can also tell you that the effort for teaching or, this online pedagogical is very difficult, more difficult than, being physically present. We have seen it. It looks like that it is not, it is so, it is so not so difficult, but yes. So thank you so much, Professor Picon, for joining us. It's afternoon there. It must be your lunch time. And thank you so much, Architect Sangeet Sharma. It has been really wonderful meeting you. You and your father had been really our mentor. And Architect Kapil Setia, sir, we really need a leader like you. You have done a lot of good experiences, addition in India under your leadership. We would not only have this dialogue or discussion ending here, we would really appreciate if we can have some more futuristic collaboration, as Picon has mentioned about, the global exposure. So we are always welcome for any kind of a collaboration or any kind of a discussion happen for the betterment of architecture of Chandigarh, of India, of France, of global. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so
Thank you very much. Thank you
so much.
Thank
And
you,
next time in
Rajendra.
India or in France.
Sure.
Yes.
Picon, I was in GST last year, so I could not meet you, but I met Michael Hayes. So we had a good time. Yes.
Excellent. Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
It was very nice
Bye, Kapil
catching
sir.
up, Picon.
Bye,
Have a
Rajendra.
good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, all the panelists. Thank you once again. Have a
Thank you
great
very much.
evening.
Thank you very much.
Madhu, would you like to give a vote of thanks? Madhu?
I just want to thank each and everyone for such an insightful discussion. It was really, really wonderful. we'll try and again post the full video for all the students of architecture and everybody else to go through, because